Imagine being born into a humble family of slaves in Egypt, in a time where life offers no guarantees and each day is a struggle for survival. But in a surprising twist of fate, you find yourself suddenly elevated to nobility, becoming part of the royal family, with the possibility of even becoming heir to the very throne of Pharaoh. This unusual scenario is not a movie script, but the beginning of the extraordinary story of Moses, a central figure not only in Jewish history but also in Christian tradition and other Abrahamic religions. Today, we embark on a fascinating and revealing biblical study about the birth and life of Moses. Prepare yourself for an unforgettable journey through the scriptures. Before diving into this narrative, do not forget to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications. This way, you won't miss any of our biblical studies, which are designed to enrich your knowledge and spirit. Moses is not just a historical character but a symbol of faith, endurance, and leadership. His life and teachings are found in the biblical books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. He is revered as a powerful preacher of God's word, a liberator who led the Hebrew people out of slavery in Egypt and towards the Promised Land. Moreover, Moses is known for receiving the Ten Commandments, which are cornerstones in both Jewish and Christian beliefs and practices. But to fully appreciate the magnitude of Moses' feats, it's essential to remember his humble and turbulent beginnings. His birth was a miraculous event and a testimony of divine protection amidst brutal persecution. The people of Israel, who had lived in Egypt for centuries, were in a desperate situation. Previously, under the rule of another pharaoh, they had enjoyed a privileged status thanks to Joseph, an ancestor of Moses who was governor of Egypt. However, this situation had changed dramatically. The Israelites became slaves, enduring unimaginable suffering at the hands of the Egyptians. The climax of this oppression came when the pharaoh, fearing the growing number of Israelites, ordered the killing of all newborn Hebrew boys. In this dark and hopeless context, Moses was born. In Exodus chapter 1, which we studied in our previous video, the difficult situation of God's people in Egypt is described. However, in chapter 2, the perspective shifts dramatically, focusing on the story of a specific family. Let's now read Exodus 2:1 and 2. A man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a daughter of Levi. She conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. This verse introduces us to Moses' family, and prepares us for one of the most moving stories of salvation and triumph in the Bible. Moses' story is a powerful evocation of how, even in the most adverse circumstances, divine providence can work wonders and change the course of history. This narrative begins with a universal event. A man and a woman meet, fall in love, marry, and have a child. This is a common story across all cultures and eras, and it was no different for Moses' parents. However, Moses, in his writing, opted for a concise and direct approach, without delving into detailed minutiae about his parents or his own birth. To get a fuller view of these events, we must turn to other parts of the Bible that provide us with more context and depth. If one had the opportunity to write their own biography, it's likely that considerable attention would be devoted to the story of their parents. Moses, on the other hand, barely mentions the names of his progenitors, Amram and Jochebed, who were ordinary people living under the harsh reality of slavery in Egypt, belonging to the tribe of Levi. This limited information is all Moses initially includes in his account, although he later identifies his parents by name. In Numbers 26:59 we read, "The name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt, and she bore to Amram Aaron and Moses, and their sister Miriam." The Exodus narrative tells us about Moses' birth with poetic brevity, "And she bore a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months." The Hebrew word used to describe baby Moses is tov, which literally means good. Jewish commentators have interpreted that his parents saw in him something more than mere physical beauty. They perceived a special divine purpose. In the New Testament, Stephen speaks of this divine grace in Acts 7:20. At that time Moses was born, and he was pleasing to God. He was brought up for 3 months in his father's house. Similarly, the letter to the Hebrews, in its chapter 11 verse 23, highlights the faith of Moses' parents, who dared to hide him defying the king's decree. By faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. But why did this Levite couple have to hide their baby? They already had 2 children, Aaron and Miriam, but the king of Egypt had ordered the killing of all newborn Hebrew males, throwing them into the Nile River. This cruel order, recorded in Exodus 1:22, raises the question, what could have led the Pharaoh to take such an extreme decision? A possible explanation lies in the Egyptian religion, where the Nile River was revered as a god. Perhaps the Pharaoh claimed that this god demanded the sacrifice of Hebrew children. Continuing with the biblical narrative, we find in Exodus 2:3, unable to hide Moses any longer, Jochebed took a desperate but inspired measure. She built a small ark of bulrushes, sealed it with pitch and tar, and placed Moses inside, setting it at the river's edge. The Hebrew word for ark, teba, is also used to refer to Noah's Ark, reinforcing a thematic connection between both stories. Both vessels were sealed with pitch to prevent water penetration. Without oars, rudder, or sail, the ark was at the mercy of the river's currents, symbolizing the surrender of the child's fate to divine providence. Moreover, although protected against the water, there was the danger of the Nile crocodiles, a risk Jochebed was willing to take, trusting that her faith and ingenuity would guide her. The story of Moses and the ark is a fascinating tale of divine providence and unexpected twists. When the carefully sealed bulrush basket was set adrift in the Nile, it began a journey that would change not only Moses' destiny but also that of an entire people. The verses of Exodus 2:4-6 tell us what happened next. Moses' sister, watching from afar, observed how the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river. While the princess's maidens walked along the riverbank, the daughter of Pharaoh saw the ark among the reeds and sent one of her maids to fetch it. Upon opening the ark, she found the crying child, and moved by compassion, recognized him as a Hebrew child. This pivotal moment shows how divine intervention can manifest in the most unlikely circumstances. The story teaches us how, in an ironic twist of fate, baby Moses was brought into the hands of what should have been his greatest enemy. The palace of Pharaoh, the most dangerous place for a Hebrew child due to the royal edict, became a safe haven for Moses. This turn in the narrative shows that God often works in mysterious and surprising ways. Moses' sister, displaying exceptional cunning, approached the daughter of Pharaoh and suggested calling a Hebrew nurse to care for the child. The daughter of Pharaoh agreed, and unknowingly, invited Moses' own mother to care for him. In this way, Jochebed was not only able to raise her son during his early years but also received payment for it. This act of faith by Jochebed, trusting God and placing Moses in the river, was generously rewarded. Eventually, as recounted in Exodus 2:10, the time came to bring Moses to the royal palace. The daughter of Pharaoh officially adopted him, giving him the name Moses, meaning drawn out of the water. This name not only reflects his physical rescue from the Nile, but also foreshadows his future role as the liberator of the Israelites from Egypt. Moses, raised in Pharaoh's palace, had access to the education and wisdom of one of the most advanced civilizations of antiquity. According to Acts 7:22, Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. This training prepared Moses for his future mission, although at that time no one, not even he himself, could have imagined it. The contrast between the humble basket of bulrushes and the opulence of royal life in Egypt further highlights the extraordinary path God had laid out for Moses. From floating uncertainty on the waters of the Nile to traveling in princely chariots, Moses' life is a testament to how God acts in favor of those who put their faith in him. Although the exact historical identification of the Pharaoh of that era and his daughter remains a subject of debate and speculation, what is indisputable is the way this story captures the essence of faith, providence, and redemption. Moses' story is a reminder that, in God's plans, even the most challenging circumstances can be transformed into stories of salvation and hope. In the context of ancient Egyptian customs, the firstborn of the princess effectively could have had succession rights to the throne. This possibility becomes even more intriguing if we consider that Ramses II and his queen had no children. Under this circumstance, Moses, raised as the son of Pharaoh's daughter, could have been considered for succession. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus reinforces this idea by stating that Moses was the heir to the Egyptian throne, and that as a young man, he victoriously led the Egyptian armies in a battle against the Ethiopians. During the first 40 years of his life, Moses lived in the court of Pharaoh. He was educated and grew up as an Egyptian, adopting their appearance, manner of speaking, and behavior. This period of his life is reflected in his recognition as an Egyptian when he arrived in Midian, according to the account in the book of Exodus. Moses' education took place in the Great Temple of the Sun, a prestigious learning center of the time. The Egyptians were advanced in various disciplines. Their knowledge in astronomy, for example, included studies on the distance between the Earth and the Sun, and theories about the Earth's sphericity. In chemistry, they demonstrated extraordinary skill, particularly in the embalming technique, a practice whose precise methods have yet to be replicated today. In the arts, they excelled in the preparation of pigments, achieving brighter and more durable colors than many known today, as evidenced in paintings and artifacts that have preserved their vividness over millennia. Moreover, they possessed great libraries, being a people of deep knowledge and culture, as mentioned in Acts 7:22, where it is stated that Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Despite his extensive training in Egyptian wisdom and science, Moses had not been educated in the knowledge of God. This lack does not diminish his stature as an exceptional figure. Stephen, the first Christian martyr, offers in Acts 7 a profound insight into this stage of Moses' life. Moses' story is a testimony to the constant struggle between good and evil, between divine purposes and Satan's attempts to thwart them. Despite adversities, faith in God and His faithfulness are key to the fulfillment of His purposes in our lives. Moses, after living 40 years as a prince in Egypt, spent another 40 years in a process of spiritual transformation as a shepherd of sheep. This contrast in his life highlights Moses' conscious choice to serve God instead of clinging to earthly riches. As written in Hebrews 11:24-26, Moses chose to be associated with God's people, considering the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. Thus, we conclude this study, remembering the importance of faith and courage in Moses' life. His story is a reminder that regardless of our current situation, fidelity to God and His ways can lead us to a greater purpose and an eternal reward. With this, we come to the end of our video. Until our next meeting, and may God bless you.